Hello, everybody, and welcome. Bienvenue. Radu to Teach, Learn, Share, a podcast that thoughtfully explores teaching and learning practices in higher ed. I'm Jasmine Parra, a learning technology consultant at Teaching and Learning Services at McGill University. I'm joined by my co-host for this podcast series, Dr. Carolyn Samuel, the Associate Director of Faculty and Teaching Development at Teaching and Learning Services.
Thank you, Jasmine. In this podcast series, Course Design with Sustainability in Mind, we've been exploring ways to design or redesign courses to raise students' awareness of multiple facets of sustainability. We heard how sustainability was integrated into a course on concrete structures in the Faculty of Engineering, and in another case, how sustainability was addressed in a Hispanic literature course in the Faculty of Arts. And then we spoke with an instructor who teaches in the Faculty of Management and learned about strategies for making the course design or redesign process itself sustainable. Today's guests will tell us about a course that inherently addresses the three pillars of sustainability. And I'll just remind everybody what those pillars are: environmental, social, and economic. Our guests' redesign efforts led them to improving their understanding of how to create a coherent course design, one where learning outcomes align with the assessment tasks and the teaching strategies. Now, instructors are not necessarily aware of principled approaches to course design. And that's understandable because instructors are experts in their academic domain, in their discipline, but not necessarily in education and how to design a course. So why does their experience learning how to design a course matter in the context of sustainability?
So this is something that I've actually spent some time reflecting on myself because I use the term sustainability often when supporting instructors' decisions about technologies in their course design. And I've at times wondered how this particular context of sustainability fits in with the bigger picture and ultimately the three pillars that you mentioned, Carolyn. I think in this case, if we take a step back, we can say with confidence that just about anything in our world that is designed well is likely to have better longevity. And so in terms of course design, thoughtful and principled design can result in courses that are effective, that are enduring and adaptable, benefiting both the instructor and students over time. So for instructors, this might reduce the need for frequent revisions, for example, and overall, thoughtful course design is likely to serve students well beyond the course, as they may be better equipped to achieve the desired learning outcomes in that course. And if students achieve those learning outcomes, well, I would say that that's a pretty big win for society in general.
Yeah, so if we're thinking about longevity and we're thinking about sustainability, it reminds me of a book that's popular in the field of education. It's called Make It Stick: The Science of Successful Learning. So there might be a greater potential to make learning stick if we design our courses with sustainability in mind. All of that really makes good sense, Jasmine. So how about we meet today's guests and we get the conversation going?
Joining us on the podcast today are Mylène Riva and Laurianne Debanné. Mylène Riva is an associate professor in the Department of Geography. She is a health geographer and population health researcher who does applied research to understand housing and community conditions as structural determinants of health and as settings for intervention to promote health and well-being for Inuit, First Nations, urban and rural dwellers. Among her current projects, Mylène is looking into the implications of energy poverty in Quebec for health and well-being of Canadians. Laurianne Debanné is a PhD student in the Department of Geography. In fact, Mylène is her supervisor. Laurianne's research focuses on energy poverty, healthy housing, and just energy transitions. For her doctoral research, she is exploring the lived experience of households facing energy poverty in different regions in Canada and the ways facing energy poverty is associated to housing and health. Mylène, Laurianne, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're eager to hear about your experience designing sustainability into your course, Health Geography.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks for inviting us.
So we'll jump right into our first question. We'd like to hear about your journey learning about sustainability in the context of course design. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And Mylène, we'll start with you.
Sure. Thanks. The journey for me began when I was selected to join the first cohort of McGill's Sustainability Education Fellow program in academic year 2022-2023. During that year, I was on sabbatical leave which meant I had no teaching or administrative responsibility within the context of McGill. So that left me with much more time to think critically about teaching than the time I normally have during a normal school year. So going into this training for me, my expectation was that I would get more insights on how to integrate sustainability content in my course. But the fellowship was much more than that. So in addition to content, it was much more about infusing sustainability values and principles, pedagogical approaches, competencies, and modes of assessment in the whole course design.
For me, I had done an undergrad in environmental sciences and geography at McGill. So I was kind of exposed to the sustainability work or courses being offered at McGill before starting my grad school. But I remember noticing that it was just content, but it didn't really go much deeper than that oftentimes. And so when the opportunity to be a part of a training program to learn about how to do that and actually work with a prof that was going through the process of redesigning a course, I was really interested in that possibility, especially as someone that is maybe thinking about a career in academia, of seeing how course design can work and how teaching can have a bigger impact than maybe more standard methods.
If I go back to sustainability content and values, so the course is about health inequities in space and social inequities in space. So we have values that are inherent to sustainability thinking around equity and justice, social inclusion, participation and empowerment, human rights and needs, resilience. But the course or the fellowship, the Sustainable Education Fellowship, provided me with, several aha moments. The first one was learning how we learn. So as a researcher, I am well versed in the topic that I do research on. I am trained to do research. I was not trained to be a course instructor.
And so that is typical. Sorry to interrupt you then, but that is typical in the higher education environment where we have professors who are schooled in their disciplines. Mm-hmm. And the idea is that they come to university or they're hired by universities or other higher education institutions to teach without having any kind of pedagogical background and just bringing the experience they had as students. But that's not the same thing as being the one who's designing the course and being responsible for supporting students with their learning.
Yeah, exactly. And for me, it was the first time since I started teaching in 2012 that I had dedicated time over several months to get trained about teaching, to learn how to teach and how to teach effectively. So it was very, very formative for me.
But can you say a little bit more about what you learned?
Yeah, well, before going into what I learned about course design, what I learned, which has been foundational for me, is how people learn. So cognitive, psychomotor, and affective. So if we want to teach effectively and I guess learn effectively, we need to tap into these three ways that people learn. And so I've been integrating different types of activity in my course. And also what I realize is that sustainable pedagogies for me are ways of doing research. So working transdisciplinarily, building that knowledge on experience and participation, collaborating across sectors and with one another, empowerment and being action-oriented, using arts-based approach, using place-based approach, focusing on problem or project-based activities, paying attention to cultural sensitivity and safety, and socio-effective ways of learning and doing. These are sustainable pedagogies that I have been using in my research and how I conduct research project, but it never occurred to me to bring them into the classroom. So that's another important learning for me.
Do you have any concrete examples that you can share with us?
one thing that I'm doing much more is to not speak that much and let the students do the speaking. So I've been using in the past like think, pair, share type of activities, but now I'm using them much more. I make students discuss papers that we have to read for 20 minutes at a time. The time it takes for them to really make sense of the study they are reading about or the concept they are reading about. I make them draw concepts map. And that this idea really came from Laurianne. So Laurianne was the most important person in redesigning the course. Like I'm the conduit, but Laurianne came in with the ideas.
Yeah, Laurianne, you're right on the money there with the science of learning and understanding that students need to be the ones grappling with the content. Students can learn by listening to an instructor for sure, but it's when we grapple with the content and we have to manipulate the ideas in some way, that's how the learning really happens. I'd like to come back also to transdisciplinarity. We've heard repeatedly in this podcast series from the instructors who have redesigned their courses in the context of the CEF program is that value of transdisciplinarity and interacting with people from other disciplines and taking a more holistic approach to course design and bringing in ideas from other disciplines. And it doesn't seem to matter what the field is, but sustainability seems to be somehow galvanizing and it brings people together and there's a common interest and it seems real merit in talking to people, to instructors and students from other disciplines when doing the course design. How do you feel about that?
Well, I think these are like really great and important points, Carolyn. I think in geography, we like to think of ourselves as an interdisciplinary discipline. Inherently, there's human dimension of geography, there's physical, natural dimensions of geography, there's geographical information science as well. So we work across areas of interest, areas of discipline, but in teaching health geography, so it's about recognizing that where we live has an impact on our health. So if we think about the communities in which we live and how they might have an impact on our health, well, if we want to create healthy communities, we need to create better housing. We need to create better road network and provide active transport options. We need to make sure that communities are socially inclusive. We need to provide air that is not polluted, access to green space, access to food options that are affordable, healthy, culturally appropriate. So when we think about all of these things, no one discipline can address the issue. No one sector. Transdisciplinarity is academic disciplines, but it's also working with sectors outside of academia. So to be able to enact change, to create or to design healthy communities, it cannot only happen in academia. We need to work with urban planners. We need to work with policymakers. We need to work with engineers, architects, and others, right? So I agree to tackle any sustainability issues, whether it's related to health or to another topic. We need to start working more from a transdisciplinary perspective, but that's a challenge also.
Yeah, it's a challenge for a number of reasons. One being the structure of many higher education institutions where we are separated, where the disciplines are not integrated. They're not necessarily transdisciplinary in design.
Yeah, that's one of the challenge and being taught to work in a certain way. And what we've come across, Laurianne and I, and other research projects in which we're involved is trying to speak the same language, trying to we're all using the same words and in health geography. So we use words like discrimination and racism and social inequities and social inequalities, which are not the same. We talk about health. We talk about all these definitions and we try to have a common understanding of these concepts. And that takes time. And people coming from other disciplines will have approached these words maybe or these concepts from different angles. So there's space for that as well. in the course for students to exchange on what they know. Everyone comes in, they bring something to class that they've acquired before, and we encourage them to acknowledge that and to build on what they're bringing into the class.
Well, you mentioned the students. Maybe we could talk a little bit more about the actual course that you redesigned. And can you tell us how many students tend to be in the class, and who are they? What are they studying? What year are they in? So any background information that can give us context for the course might be helpful for us to better understand the design.
Mm-hmm. So the course is usually around 85 students, 85 to 90. So Health Geography, Geog 303, is a required course in the Health Geography minor in the ecological determinants of health in society concentration of the faculty program and environment. But for most students taking this class, it's an elective. And we have students coming from geography-related programs such as the Interfaculty Sustainability Science and Society program from urban studies. But we also have students taking other concentration and environmental studies, students coming from IDS, International Development Studies. We have students coming from political science, from time to time for more microbiology, physiology type of science, but it's mostly a good mix between arts and science students who are taking this class.
Can you tell us about the learning outcomes that you planned for the course?
There's 4 learning outcomes. The first is to assess the complex interconnection between health and place, identify and explain how select sustainable development goals relate to health and well-being, reconcile and reflect on different ways of knowing and doing health geography, and communicate complex concepts in plain language and through drawing. That's not on the course outline, but we welcome drawings as well.
And I noticed that each of these begins with a verb, and it's something that students can demonstrate.
Yes. So it took us a very long time to arrive with these learning outcomes. We have a whole list of verbs from which we can work to frame learning outcomes that we receive through the Sustainability Education Fellow program. So that was very useful.
Did you know about that beforehand, before the Sustainability Education Fellows program, that often learning outcomes begin with a verb and it's something that students can demonstrate?
No, there were so many learnings in that training. I wish every instructor joining any university would be able, in their first semester or first year, not having to teach, but honing their teaching skills and getting trained out to teach. I think there would be considerable gains in efficiency to be made if our journey as university professors started with learning more about how to teach and how students learn and how we learn.
I wanted to add to that, and I wanted to thread it to something we talked about earlier. And Carolyn, you mentioned that many instructors step into teaching roles without formal training, and they often rely on these sort of remnants of their own experiences as students to kind of guide them. And I was thinking about how that relates to sustainability in course design, because to me, it highlights the critical importance of having a well thought out design and effective teaching practices, because students are going to also remember some of those strategies, I would say, and those students will eventually become instructors. And I think that making those changes as an instructor now will have an impact on the course, and yes, the content and what students learn, but I think it will also impact the student experience and our future instructors who will come to higher ed and, be integrated into the system without that formal training possibly, and draw on those experiences. So bringing it back to sustainability in course design, I think that's pretty cool.
And that's how also the learning outcomes and the modes of assessments, they were also designed to be transversal, but also that students can carry them in other courses or in the workplace if they decide to go to the workplace afterwards.
Can you tell us a little bit about those assessments and how they align with your learning outcomes?
Yes. Well, first, I canceled exam the year of the pandemic, and then I started designing assignments, which I learned through the training. Technically, I could not assess students on specific assignments if we're not seeing the skills in class, like writing an essay. If there's no training on how to write an essay, then you can't assess students on necessarily how well the essay has been written.
So what you're speaking about here is actually alignment.
Alignment.
Exactly. So the assignments need to align with the learning outcomes and with the instructional strategies.
Exactly. So alignment is also something very important that I learned. So there's no exam in this course. The focus is really on experiential learning. So the assignment, there's a mix of individual and teamwork. There's a semester-long project, a case study that students have to work on as a team. And it's on a topic of their choice related to a topic that we've seen in class, broadly defined. And it starts by creating teams, coming up with a topic, but then students work individually to create an annotated bibliography, identifying 6 empirical papers published in scientific journals and making a summary of it, paying attention to the research question or why the study was conducted, how it was conducted, paying attention to the methods, what the results are, and what are the implications. So students individually work on this annotated bibliography, and I go over during class what is an annotated bibliography, what I expect to see in an annotated bibliography. And then students bring in their annotated bibliography to integrate their knowledge with other team members to create a concept map of how everything fits together. So to give you an example, one topic that was explored last year, student worked on the health impacts of energy poverty. So one student focused her annotated bibliography on older adults, another one on children and youth, another one on gender differences, and another one on the heat or eat trade-off. And then they brought in these different subtopics of energy poverty and health in classroom. And during class, there's about 3 or 4 dedicated sessions for students to work together. So they bring in the learnings they've made through the production of their annotated bibliography to draw out a concept map of how, in this example, how energy poverty is connected to health and well-being. And this concept map serves as the outline of the integrative essay that they will have to write as a team. So everyone will bring in parts of their annotated bibliography to write an essay together on the topic, in this case, energy poverty, health, and well-being. And so again, there's dedicated time in class for students to work on their essay, on the outline of their essay. And then I also provide clear guidelines as to what is an essay, what should go in an essay, and how the essay is going to be marked at the end. Before they hand in their final essay, there's presentation during class time. So each group presents their concept map, the overall structure of their essay with 1 slide. Last year, I allocated more than 1 slide, but students ran over time. So now it's focused on 1 slide, 5 minutes. And other students in class, they have to provide peer assessment to 2 groups. So this is the case study and the teamwork. And then there's individual assignments. Last year, the first time I gave this course after we redesigned it, individual assignment was the annotated bibliography as part of the case study and 3 reflection pieces. But the weight of the individual assignment was, I think, 40% and 60% for the team work. And students said that we should flip. There should be more points allocated to individual work. And so that's why this year I reduced the point of the weight assigned to teamwork, and the assignments will be increased in terms of content cover, but in terms of weight as well.
I wanted to ask a follow-up to the assessment question. And you noted that you got rid of the final exam and you changed some of those assessment tasks. And I'm wondering, how did you manage the grading load of the different new type of assessment task that you have now? And has it been sustainable for your workload as an instructor or TA?
I can touch on it. As a TA, I had TA'd before doing this program. So it was really cool to TA as someone that also helped with the course design. Also, just as a grad student, it was crazy to see how much goes into course design. You don't realize how much work profs actually put into it, especially when they care about it. So it was very impressive to see it all kind of come to life from there. I think the grading was fun in a set, it's always a lot of work, but it was really fun to do the grading on a project. It wasn't random essays. They were projects I had heard about throughout the semester during TA hours or office hours that students had talked to me about. I was able to be involved in the process along the way with students and the student groups. And for the reflections too, they were quite short, but just gave students the chance to think about what they were learning, how they were relating what they were learning to things that were happening in Montreal or in their hometowns as well, was one of the reflections they had to do. So I think it is more work than grading an exam for sure, but it's also more meaningful, which makes it more worthwhile, I think, than just grading a multiple choice exam.
We're getting toward the end of our time. I'd like to ask one more question. What advice do you have for instructors who would like to design a course with sustainability in mind?
Do it. Make sure you have dedicated time. Spend some time reading about sustainability in higher education, but also the basics around pedagogy as well. Really important. Integrate and engage students in redesigning the course.
I think going in with an open mind, I think we have a lot of ideas of what sustainability is, especially when it comes to content, but having an open mind of how sustainability also translates to processes and different ways of aligning things allows you to maybe engage with it a bit more and have more fun with it.
And I'm going to throw in humility as well. Going back to this idea that content might not be as important as learning outcomes. It's quite something to accept, and it just requires complete shifting of how we think about teaching. And so there needs to be, as I said, dedicated time, but like real dedicated time, because it's a paradigm shift.
But yeah, you said before that instructors come to the notion of course design thinking about the content and all the things that they would like to teach students. But that shift is to think about what we want our students to leave the course with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
So maybe that's a good note to end our podcast on. We'd like to thank you both very much for joining us today, Mylène Riva and Laurianne Debanné. Thank you both for your insights into course design with sustainability in mind.
And thank you to our listeners for tuning in. Please remember to subscribe to Teach, Learn, Share and let others know about it. Until next time.